cult and classic.
Welcome, friends and fiends, to another brand new episode of Cult and Classic Films Podcast, the first of 2025. We took a break from pretty much November until now, the middle of January when we're recording this. I hope everyone had a great time off. We were spending time rolling out getting some stuff ready to roll out, as well as catching up on some releases. The most recent release that has launched, if you want to check it out on the shop at cultandclassicfilms.com, is Dunwich Journals. It is an anthology of Lovecraft short films, 3 short films, and a framing story, which I myself directed, starring and introducing the storyteller of Dunwich. So check that out. I think it's a lot of fun. And the other filmmakers are very talented. We have Eric Wofford, who did uh, Bigfoot's Bride. I always say if it's Bride of Bigfoot or Bigfoot's Bride. We talked about it. We talked about the film. It has Bigfoot PP. So check that out. And we also have a film by Sebastian Godin, a short in there, who we will also be releasing his film Blood Rites of the Vampire, because we're on a vampire kick right now. And lastly, I'm going to say his name in the most American way possible, but Swedish animator Daniel Lanier, who I don't know how to say that. He says it in a very beautiful way that sounds nothing like what I just said, but he's fantastic. Check him out on YouTube. He does a lot of skits and videos about old video games. And you can actually, it's in Swedish, but YouTube has rolled out a translation closed captioning. So you can actually turn on closed captioning and then have it translate to English live. It's pretty cool. So of course, I'm your host, Nate Wyckoff, film critic and comedian down here in beautiful Palm Springs, California. And we have with us Mandy Longley, who is in cold Massachusetts. How are you doing, Mandy?
Sure. Trying to stay warm. I'm actually like, I'm on my elliptical. So for those of you on YouTube, you might see me bounce around a little bit, trying to stay warm, keep my blood moving while we record. It is at these
It's,
temperatures, it is hard to keep a house warm. So
yeah,
that's
it's
the sad,
here.
cold truth.
I fully acclimated because it's 69 and I'm cold, and that's 69 in the house. I'm cold.
Mm,
So
yeah.
I don't know how to, I don't know what will happen if I go back during the winter, again. I, I might just die. Might be that scene of Jack, actually, that my light went out. If you're watching on YouTube, it might be that scene of Jack Torrance in, Kubrick's The Shining, where he's just frozen, frozen face.
Mm-hmm.
So this,
That it feels like.
yeah, this episode has been delayed since October, middle of October. This is part two of our Vampires Can Dance pairing. So to check out part one, go back, and I believe it's episode 224, and we are on 228. And 24 is Abigail from 2024, which is a fun watch, and we talked a lot about it, especially about the ending, which personally I think could use improvement, and we talked some interesting ways they could have done that. So now, what are we watching? We are watching the Italian vampire film released in the United States under the title The Vampire and the Ballerina. There's a couple of things wrong with that title, which we can talk about. The original title in Italy was, again, I don't speak Italian, but it is L'amante del vampiro, which translates to the vampire's lover, which is perhaps closer, but also I don't think particularly apt for the film. But it is a black and white 1960 vampire feature that is full of kind of what you would hope for or expect from, uh, you know, 60s to early 80s era, especially late 70s era European vampire films. It's a period piece. It's Gothic. It's got real architecture of an ancient variety, and lots of well-endowed women staring pensively at the camera with strong makeup. So got all that. Um,
In
yeah,
leotards?
and
Yeah.
leotards. Oh, there's a lot of leotards. That was a new one to me. That was a new one in this genre. So the plot follows. I don't. This is going to sound just completely off the wall, and that's because it is. There's a
Mhm.
group of in this European town near a castle. There is a group of, they call them ballerinas. They're women who dance, a troupe who are I guess, led by this guy's nephew, and they're staying at the uncle's house, and the uncle is old. And at first, I thought he was blind because he just stares straight ahead, but that is not the case. And the nephew is kind of this, like, I guess he's supposed to be a dashing young blonde man. Um, anyway, it's just to get the women in the general vicinity of a vampire who lives with his vampire wife in a nearby castle. This isn't really spoiling anything. We see a vampire very early on, and then we don't see him again for quite some time. And it has a lot of it has a lot of the two lead women arguing with each other about what's going on, and one not telling the other, and the other one says, "I know you're not telling me something," and the other one says, "I'm not telling you anything, get out." And they do that like several scenes do that over and over again. Uh, but it's stuff to talk about. I don't think it was the worst, but there's some hilarious things that I want to touch on. First, though, Mandy, you found this film for us. And it is by title a perfect pairing with Abigail, which is about a child vampire who is a ballerina and wreaks havoc on unsuspecting criminals.
Hmm.
This is also a vampire movie with dancing. So, what were you expecting versus what did you get out of The Vampire and the Ballerina?
I don't know. I was expecting something along the lines of some dancers and a vampire based on the description, I think even on IMDb, and it was like just a wild ride. It was full of surprises, very, retro of the time period. It it was great because it was like I thought I knew what I was getting in, and that was not it. And it was entertaining nonetheless. And then I also um I wasn't sure what to expect for the special effects of
Hmm.
like a film from this time period. And I actually pretty much like I enjoyed the practical effects that they used in this film.
Yeah, I did also. I think that what would you even say? I'm trying to pull up my notes here, which is oh, here we go. The effects are cool. There's the classic thing that a lot of werewolf films of this period and other periods do as well, and vampires, where if the vampires are ugly in this, they're monstrous, and there's a couple of twists on the lore. It's when they feed, they become human looking. So that is sort of, I guess, the impetus for them to feed, but
Mhm.
the effects of them looking ugly is very good. Especially they use that trick where they show the hand a lot of the vampire reaching for things, and the prosthetic and makeup hand is actually very well done. Usually the hands are not very they're just kind of, you can tell they're fake. These ones, I actually kind of felt like if you had some sort of strange, mutation of humans, the hands have these like claw nails. It was much better than I anticipated, and they were smart to use those several times. Um, the special effects there is, and again, I don't think this is a spoiler movie. It follows the general plot of a million vampire films all the way back to Dracula, especially the film versions, pretty closely. Peter Cushing's Dracula, excuse me, Christopher Lee. Dracula film around this time had come out and was very successful in Italy. And so every company trying to finance films wanted a vampire movie. So in general, this was the implications by one of the writers, because there were several rounds of rewrites for this film. And one of the writers indicated that it was the same kind of period piece drama he had been writing, but just with vampires. So it seemed like he implied from his greater statement that it was a different film that they changed to have vampires. The other interesting thing I thought that was different is we see Armand is the vampire. The main bad guy throughout the thing who keeps feeding on the young women. He he actually kills the vampires he turns. And he says that basically, like, you'll never, there will never be another. to walk the path of the vampire, which is interesting because the only time we see a staking once, and it's him staking his own progeny, um, right when they're born. So it's a very int I think there's something there that could have been much more because he's not the normal um, Christopher Lee, uh, Karloff. He's not the normal Hammer and Universal vampire that we get, where he's kind of dashing but ominous, very powerful. He's actually a little manic and psychotic as far as like he laughs and like he has these. It seems like he has these mood swings when he's talking to the vampire wife, the Countess. We don't know. We
Hmm.
never know, I don't think, what their real relationship is because she says that he's her master and he pretends to be the servant, but she's bound to him
Hmm.
and she tries to get um, I mean, there's two male leads in this that are not really leads at all. They're actually a very small part of the film, but she tries to seduce one and get him to, I guess, kill Armand at some point. And Armand, in turn, lets him live for some reason. Doesn't seem to bother him really. But he goes from like doting like on his knees at his wife's feet, saying there will never be another, to like pushing her aside and laughing and going, "You'll never be free of me." But then she sort of does the same, and at the end, the vampires are gonna die. They're on the balcony and the sun's rising, and they both insist that the other is the master. And it's interesting that they did not give a definitive clarity on that. Um,
Hmm.
so I found that it made me wonder if there was an original script in there somewhere that had pieces left over that was sort of glossed, by
Yeah, it could have been.
more
Or we
generic
lost
things.
something in translation.
It's true because we watched the
See.
dub. The voice acting in the dub was quite good, I thought, for what it is. I mean, often we get some really bad dubs. It actually reminded me of a film with some hilariously bad dubs. The Horrors of Spider Island, which Mystery Science Theater did a great episode on, and it's actually also interesting thing about that if you want to check that out because I think it would make a good double feature with this because they're both a group of female dancers trapped somewhere with a monster. That one is they shipwreck and they're stuck on an island with a mutated spider. And this one, of course, they're trapped in an old castle uh, near a vampire. And this one actually has dancers, which is shocking. Some of the women actually clearly have dance training, whereas usually in this type of film,
Hmm.
especially, all the way from the 50s up, even the late 40s, these genre films, they maybe have one or two dancers, but otherwise they have dancers. They have people that they have women that act like they're dancers, but they do not have dancing ability. It's usually the tribal scene. There's some sort of female jungle group, and they do a seductive dance that is insane. This one they have dancers. I think the choreographer is dead, but they had dancers, and they
Yeah,
did
there's
some.
some pretty crazy scenes with the
Well, yeah.
dancing.
And they call
Like,
them
yeah.
ballerinas, but they're
Hmm.
clearly like dance hall girl burlesque acts. There
Hmm.
is, it's not
Yeah.
ballet. It breaks in from classic music where they're doing like really choreographed, like boy band equivalent. They're all in unison, moving in
Hmm.
several lines, to these like 60s um, rock and roll beat, pre-beatnik era musical interludes where I mean, they go wild. There's no unison. It's a bunch of them doing truly insane dance moves. Um, and it's weird to see people who can dance do things that are just straight up confusing. Um, we uh, there's one character that gets she's like a featured character because she has a lot of shots, especially in the dancing, but she doesn't have a role really in the movie at all. She has dark hair. Her name is Ostenda, and she did a lot of great genre films during this time and actually before as well. She was about 25 in this movie. The girls act like they're like like young teenagers, but
Hmm.
they're all in their 20s, and so it's an odd sort of dichotomy. But anyway, she actually clearly can
It's very
dance.
Mean Girls.
Yeah, very much so.
Okay.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Yes. Everyone in high school is going to their 20th reunion.
Hmm.
Um, she's clearly a dancer, but there's one moment where she's center and she's moving back, like the group is forming around her again, so her solo's done. And her feet are doing like clearly choreographed dance moves, but her hands, she has like prayer hands together, but they're turned down, and she just wiggles it from side to side, her hands together. And it's, I don't even know how to describe it other than that. It's like an upside down prayer hands against her stomach that she just wiggles back and forth. And I can't imagine somebody actually telling someone to do that. And if they did, I can't imagine them saying, good, good, let's do it. Uh,
Yeah, that's what I was picturing. Exactly. You got it. You got it. Yeah.
right, exactly. But there are some clearly they kind of were smart with some of the dance moves. Some dancers in there could do very impressive things like, high kicks, vertical leg high kicks. And there's one, I think she's just, basically the equivalent of a featured extra, but she does very tight backflips. And there's two scenes where she does them over and over again, just like four in a
Mhm.
row. It's pretty impressive. So that was different because usually we don't get that kind of skill level. Um, but the dancing, the only purpose for the dancing is to give titillation and sexy time to the movie because
Mhm.
the fact that they're dancers has no bearing on the plot whatsoever, not even a
They
little.
don't dance their way out of the
Nope.
vampire
Right.
situation.
There's no,
They'll
there's
use their
no,
like upside down prayer wiggly hands as like a special move
yeah,
to
yeah. It's an anti.
get the vampires.
That's why that person didn't get eaten. Um,
Mm,
and
really?
even the you'd think that the women would fall prey to the vampire. Only two of them, and there's a lot of them, fall prey to the
Hmm.
vampire. And then there's a woman in the opening who's like a local, she's milking the cows, and she gets bit. But that's it. The rest of the girls just stay in the castle or whatever, the house near the
Having
castle.
the underwear pajama party. I
Yeah,
think that was part of the
there
movie too.
very much early on. I'm like, it's really advanced fan service. Like it's contemporary anime fan service. There's a prolonged scene in the beginning where they're listening through a door, like all of them crammed together, but they have no pants on. It's like they're in these short nighties, and it's just, panties and bums. And I mean, I'm not complaining, but it's very confusing because there's no purpose for that scene. You can't hear what they're hearing, you just hear them talking to each other, and because it's also dubbed, it's even more sort of insane. Um,
Hmm. Yeah, it
and they
was
also,
crazy. It was
yeah,
like, and like, is this like some kind of weird Hugh Hefner mansion in
right,
Italy
right.
that's like
The
posing
uncle
as a
dresses like
dangerous
Hugh
thing?
Hefner. He's always in a smoking
Yeah,
jacket and he has a cane.
yeah, yes.
Um,
And it's just like, so which one of these buildings is actually worse for these girls to be in? It's like, you can be in this building or you can go next door to the vampire building.
yeah,
Like, make your choice.
it's interesting, and you can tell it's not an American film. Um, because it easily, in many ways, it could have been, but you can tell it's not, or a UK film because of the UK and America, even now, are very careful about how they show um, women's like risque clothing or nudity, and they're fine with bums, they're fine with crossed legs, but if you will never see in an American movie a woman in her panties like not have her legs together. It's kind of like a no-no. And this one, there's quite a few anime fan service panty shots from when the front, and you're just like, it's sort of like if anyone has seen, of course, the new Nosferatu, but also even more so the original silent Nosferatu. There's like this, there is a strong sexual undercurrent to it. They really do. That's a huge part of it. It's a component of what they're trying to do, and that's present here. which and in this case they do it, I think, with just having women in nightgowns a lot, but filming them actually realistically. Like they do the scene. They're not cutting specifically to really frame sort of to frame the sexiness in a very homogenized commercial way as we would see it. And that
Mm.
to me tipped me off right away because I knew this film. I think previously I'd said this film was French. It does say that in some places online. That is incorrect. It's the confusion comes because who they call the lead because she was the most famous, but
Mhm.
Helene Remy. If I'm reading it in the as an American, her name is Helen Remy, but that's certainly not how it's said in French. But she is the lead, and the reason is because while this is a German film, it was supposed to be co-financed by France, and that fell through. So they still had her, but it is fully an Italian production. So, and you'll know that pretty early on because every name is very Italian. We have Gragnani and Ostenda and Ravioli, literally. We have lots of Quattrini, Braccesi. We have lots of Italian names here. The director, Ernesto Gastaldi, excuse me, he was one of the rewriters, or the original writers, actually. Renato Polselli. Not gonna do that one. 2025 is the year of me getting even worse pronouncing names. That is that apparently is the one thing that I changed about myself for the new year. But the women really are the lead in this film. That's something that is also kind of interesting. We get that in other European vampire and genre films to a point. I'm thinking Fangs of the Living Dead. The women have the most screen time. In this, it's very much true. We have two male leads, a boyfriend of one, and the nephew of the owner of the house, who is like apparently, I don't know, it's implied that it's his troupe, but he doesn't choreograph. In fact, he's never actually there when they dance, I don't think. Or maybe one scene, but he's
Just likes the
not.
idea of them dancing.
There's a great scene where the other guy, who is one of the boyfriends, he someone's like, "Oh, I told them stories about vampires," the uncle says, so they're scared. And of course, one has actually seen a vampire, right? There's already have one person dead from a vampire. And the hunk who is sort of dating or wants to be engaged to one of the leads, the one that I consider the main lead, Francesca, played by Tina Gloriani, who also has done a lot of genre films. He is like, "Oh, that's great. We'll do a vampire. It'll be very sensual. We'll do a vampire dance, and I'm gonna." He doesn't say freestyle. He's like, "I'm gonna freestyle it on the piano," and he just gets on the piano and starts playing this tune, and then the women just start dancing in the most it goes full 50s, like redonkulous dancing. We have some of it's kind of interesting. We have like someone who's given a lead dance spot and she has like a shawl and she's pretending they're wings and wrapping around, but their feet are straight up doing river dance. It is the funniest combination. Like top half is sensual, bottom half is I'm trying to like crush grapes. It is just hilarious. And the guy who's on the piano, he's not watching them. He turns around to look at them a couple times, like the guy in a bar scene who's like, banging away frantically at the piano, turning around to see if there's going to be a bar fight. Uh, an interesting thing is we get, as I said, I'm gonna say Helene. It's probably not right, but she plays what is booked as the lead, Luisa, but Luisa is turned to a sort of that vampire stage we're so familiar with, where they're
Mm.
under the vampire spell, but they're not actually vampires themselves. And
Hmm.
and so she's kind of his secret agent with the girls by the end. But she's billed as the lead, but really she doesn't have all the main scenes. She's sort of bitten, and then she does one role in maybe half the remaining scenes where the women are present. And the one that actually I would say the lead is the one that plays Francesca, Tina Gloriani, who apparently according to one of the later writers, was given the role because Renato Polselli, that's how you say it, Renato Polselli, uh, they were lovers at the time. So he cast her as really the lead, even though she's billed second, if billed at all. No one is really billed heavily other than Helene. So ultimately, you kind of have two films, right? You have Sexy Dance Party, and you have Vampire in the Castle. Those are the two. And most characters never cross from one to the other. Only about three or four characters ever do.
Hmm.
You also have people in the beginning that never show up again. Like the guy who's like, it's a vampire, and the uncle's like, it's like, don't give me your local hooey. And I'm like, what do you mean local hooey? Don't you live here? Like, did you just move in? Like, are you not part of this locale? But we never see him again. We get there's a lot of did anything stick out to you when you were watching it? Because it is even by one of the writers online had an interview. He said I can't remember the phrase he used. It's not one I'm familiar with, but it was saying it's pretty by the book. Um,
It was pretty by the book as far
yeah,
as vampire movies go. With the extra dance party aspect of it,
right.
it was unusual. But right is like, oh, like they introduced pretty early on that there is a vampire, and then it's sort of like people are not sure what's going on, and then like one of the characters gets affected, and they're still not really sure what's going on, but like they get lured out, uh, and then there's like whatever's going to happen with the vampire at the end, usually being killed in some manner by the
Mhm.
hero or whatever. Um, so yeah, it definitely follows that. I was actually with Sister Me is like I was surprised how many like outdoor scenes they had,
Mhm.
like
Yeah,
traveling from one place to another. They like really wanted you to understand like how people were getting from like the dancer's mansion like
yeah. It's through the
to the
woods.
vampire
That's all we
castle.
know,
There's
is
like
they say they're going
very
into the
much
woods.
through the woods, but like then they'd show them
Traipsing through,
traveling.
and it's really woods. Like that's the thing
Yes,
about this,
yeah,
that the castle
like
is a real
very
castle,
wild.
you know?
Yeah.
And you even
So I
see
guess that
them,
stood out to me because you're just like, they just straight up just film them walking around outside,
you see them
falling
struggling a
over
little bit
things.
too, like
Yeah,
getting
like
caught
like
on
you're
branches.
mhm. Yeah,
That is true. I hadn't
yeah.
thought of that element.
That kind of
Um,
stood out to me. I'm like, they are just really outside, like going
mhm.
somewhere. Um,
They and
Perhaps between the two actual locations. Who's
it's
to
true. They
say? But
could actually be that distance away. I wouldn't be that shocked. Um,
yeah.
there's also they have a couple of things that they use. I think they were smart in using actual like environments, whether they be the castle or the outside, to kind of add interest. Like I actually think the cinematography is pretty good in this movie. They have like a waterfall thing at the beginning that they film, like a natural waterfall. And they show it again later for some reason. Oh, it's because the
Hmm.
women are dancing in the water, right? And they have a stream, so they go
They
through
want
that.
you to know that you're getting closer to the vampire castle.
Right,
Someone else has already been attacked. Like they're getting close because she's with the lady that's already got vampired,
right.
right?
Yes.
She's like getting lured closer to the castle. So I felt they did a good job with that, like those kind of storytelling tools where
Hmm.
they're like introducing like like an environment or some key landmarks, and then they're using them again later to build the tension. Theoretically, but there's dancing.
Right.
Like, theoretically, they're like building that tension as they're getting closer to like the area of danger and like the vampires. So like yeah, but like there is like I guess that was stood out to me that they took so much time
Yeah.
to do that part of the storytelling of like the actual traveling between locations because not a lot happens other than them getting like tripping on things. Did someone
No,
lose their
yeah.
shoes?
They
I don't
don't
really.
shoot. Yeah, the whole
Um,
middle of the movie doesn't really have a lot of content, which I think is probably what doesn't elevate this to kind of match some of the more impressive ones. Um,
yeah.
there's a film writer, Lois Paul, who in one of his books, he actually credits this film with really affecting Hammer Productions, the most famous Gothic European horror film company, um, because and some others, because this one is heavy on the sexuality of the vampire thing, and it's
Mhm.
obvious. It's really obvious. We get lots of scenes where, like the lead early on is, it's right after the pants scene. They're still in their I don't even know what they're the shifts, the really really skimpy sleeping clothes. She goes with her boyfriend who has his shirt off, and she gets on the bed suggestively, and he lays down with her, and then they have a conversation with another girl, and then she gets up and leaves, and like leaves him, like tantalized. And it is one of those things where the 60s were in the United States when the film boards were really sort of being forced to open up, Bonnie and Clyde and all that. But this was still something that I don't think they would have broached in commercial American films. Now, this was released in the US. I believe MGM released it at some point. What I thought was interesting too is the Italian Film Board. They have their own. I don't know. I don't actually know if it's still present or not. But they have their own censor group, like we have with the MPAA, and they gave the film a VM-16, which means it's forbidden to anyone under 16. But the reason that they gave is they wanted removals of all close-ups of the vampire's face, and they wanted to shorten the final death scene because their faces melt, which has been done before, but is I liked it. It was pretty decent because they actually have
That's
the
good.
actor. Yeah, they have the actor in the mask while it's melting. So usually when we get that
Mhm.
scene, it's stop motion or it's actually a wax
Mhm.
cast that's not the person's
Mhm.
not in it. It just
Mhm.
and those are cool too. The Indiana Jones and the Ark of the Covenant, right? Indiana Jones and Last Crusade. No, last anyway, God, my brain. So you know that the melting faces. Okay, they open the Ark of the Covenant, their
Yes.
faces melt. This one was pretty decent that way, and it was they. I don't think they were special effects people when they did it. The director said that they just uh, kind of worked it out. It's like it is some sort of plaster cast of the actor's face, and then they put ash over the top, and then the latex that they, I guess, melted over the top of that. So if you watch close during the melting scene, you can see there's like it melts, but then it also chunks fall, and they're like powdered, and that's the ash. So
Mhm.
I don't know why they thought of that, except for the fact that maybe they say it says in the script that um, when Armand the vampire is threatening the Countess at one point, um, he says right after he said that he lives for her and everything he does is for her. It's a very, very bipolar moment. He says, "Just a ray of the sun and you'll burst into flame," or something like that. Well, they don't burst into flame,
Mhm.
but maybe the ash was a nod to that.
Could could
But
be.
uh,
Yeah.
but yeah, this
Pretty
is one
good.
of
It
those
was
films.
interesting. It was a little different. It was good.
Yeah,
And
I liked
like
it.
considering the
I like
time period, I guess since we didn't have special effects people, amazing.
Yeah, I mean they must somebody who knew what they were doing made
Mm.
those hands. But they really
Yeah.
did have it light. Like there's no blood on the neck or anything or even marks when the vampire
Mhm.
bites someone. We do get a
Mhm.
little bit of the sort of orgasmic, reaction to being bit, although it's for now, compared to Egger's Nosferatu, of course, it's very, very tame. But even for later ones in the 70s, it's tamer. They also there's things that don't really make sense, which isn't a shock to anyone, I think, in this particular kind of film. But for example, when Armand he doesn't bother with the man who the Countess has tried to seduce to kill her husband like vampire. But he does say that he has to take care of the woman because she knows too much. Well, I think everybody knows that at that point. But his reaction is not to bite her right away. He has to take her to the castle and chain her in the I don't know, the catacomb beneath the castle, and then bite her. We also, in the same way that they leave us unsure of who was really in control of the relationship between the two vampires, they also don't make it clear whether or not, um, our lead actress survives because she's bitten and they say she's
Mhm.
dead. And then they say the only way to save someone who's in this situation is to kill the vampire. And then they go and they kill the vampires. And then the non-boyfriend character says something along the lines of like, and Francesca might now revived. And I actually, I because we didn't watch because I'm not even sure how much we can trust the sub of this movie because there's a sub. There are actually several subs, I believe. I don't know, not speaking Italian, but it seems to me because we don't see that that she's supposed to have died. Um,
Mhm.
they did that. We talked about the G.I. Joe animated feature before, and that has a similar thing where um, Transformers, the movie came out, and people were horrified that Optimus Prime dies. So much so that they had to do sort of a lackluster four-part miniseries bringing him back. I'm like, you can't kill Optimus Prime. I think that's ridiculous. But anyway, uh, they'd followed the same plot line for G.I. Joe, and why can't I think? Duke was supposed to die because he gets stabbed or speared by a snake staff from Serpentor, and because they had just done uh, they had just done the movie for Transformers and had such a bad fan reaction, they they changed it, but they didn't have time or money to animate it. So what they did is they just say at the end, Duke's recuperating. They say he'll be fine. And I thought that's interesting because it felt like what they did here. Because
Mhm.
why would we not see her? Why would there not be a tag scene at the end? Um,
Mhm.
so and that actually I think is kind of a slightly different for this tone of film to have the heroine die, uh, sort of in a non-grandiose way. Um, It is weird though too that she is the lead character. She is the one that knows something's wrong and finds out. But the men are still the two to survive and kill the vampires.
Mhm.
So who knows who introduced that into the plot between the three script writers that are credited and the one that is not credited, who is his name escapes me. But anywho, so I think I've talked this film to death. You can watch this film. It is online, viewable on places like YouTube in a very nice high def transfer, but it also has been released by Scream Factory on Blu-ray with a new transfer, which is probably the one we watched. How it makes its way around, or why, or if it's uh, licensed on things like YouTube is questionable. But it is available. We can move to recommendations, I think. If you're the kind of horror fan who likes classic fare of this era and the Gothic films, specifically though, like some of the offbeat ones of the era, like the Mexican Gothic films, or the Aztec Mummy series, or like I said, if you've seen like me, Horrors of Spider Island, the Mystery Science Theater cut 10,000 times, and can quote it. This movie is a nice in line with that. It also makes me wonder if there were sexier scenes cut because I mean they really did do their best to like pack it with women and sort of side character starlets um, from uh, the Italian uh, the Italian acting group of the time. So it made me wonder. I'm like, did they have actually nudity and they were going to use it for their international releases and then the US cut it way down? I don't know. I would think not, only because most of the actresses are fairly uh, highbrow's not the word, but they were in productions that were not about nudity, unlike Horrors of Spider Island. Uh, so yeah, very different than Abigail. Mandy, and if anybody else, if you're not interested in that kind of film, or you're not familiar with this sort of gothic genre, uh, then you'll be bored out of your skull, I think. Or you might actually enjoy it if you like the 50s American films, the sci-fi genre. It kind of has that sort of vibe as well. You know, the like disbelief, and then, oh my gosh, she was right. We didn't believe her because she was a woman. And then they go, it has that kind of vibe too. And it has, because it's dubbed in English in 1960, many of the voices are those actors from those 50s movies. They have that exact same cadence. Um, so you might enjoy that as well. Anybody else, I think you might be like, wow, there's nothing in this movie. Mandy, would you recommend the Vampire and the Ballerina, or would you not recommend it?
I would recommend this to people who like to do their own MST3K like episodes with their
Mm-hmm.
friends or family, right? So if you have watched a bunch of episodes of MST3K and you find yourself making commentary over movies, you'd like to do so in a socially acceptable, fun environment with your loved ones, this is an amazing option to do. I was just making ridiculous commentary through the whole thing basically by myself. I was like, I should have invited people to watch this one, but we never know when they're going to be like that until we watch them. So yeah, I would
Yeah.
highly recommend this if that's kind of like what you like to do and you've been looking for another film like that
It's
you haven't
also a
seen
perfect
before.
riffing
Be a
movie
good one.
because there's space between the dialogue and scenes.
Yes.
Like it, nothing is rapid fire, so it's the kind of movie that they would have grabbed for Mystery Science Theater. I wouldn't be surprised if they do grab it for Riff Tracks at some point because it's kind of right in line with, you know, a low-key Santo the Mexican wrestler movie kind of vibe.
Mm-hmm.
So we are back 2025. We'll have more movies coming your way. I'm gonna have a very special review coming up in a week or so of a movie that I've been waiting very much for. It is by a filmmaker who made a movie that rhymes with the mm, the womb, maybe. Perhaps the best bad film of our modern time. It's an absolute delight. I'll just tell you that right now. We'll talk about that at a future episode soon. Please go ahead and like and subscribe. If you listen to the pod, wherever you get your podcasts, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave a review if it is 5 star or maximum, whatever the scale is on the program you're listening. It helps people find us. And if you're watching on YouTube, please like and subscribe and follow our channel and leave a comment. Let us know what you think. All right. Thank you all so much. I am your host, Nate Wyckoff, and Mandy Longley signing off for this.
Bye.
Bye. And to play you out is the Chud with All About Evil. And bye.
Bye.
Listeners, they moved the record button in Zoom. Here we go. All right. Bye.